was thinking about something earlier when I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and I looked at my eyes, and I knew this before, but it was more clear to me just that the eyes are definitely a window to the soul, and you can tell so much just looking at someone's eyes. Because my eyes, when I was looking, I just had these kind of bags under my eyes. And not just that, but you could see pain. And I wasn't having a good time. I had a few days that were quite difficult for me personally. And I wasn't feeling fantastic. And everything was just a bit off. And there were lots of people coughing around me. And I felt like I might have picked up something as well. Because even though I'd only just started to, well, I ran out of deuterium depleted water, so I can't get more because my mum needs it at the moment. But that's kind of going off tangent. What I really wanted to say is just that you can tell so much about someone's eyes, and someone might be expounding just how fantastic their diet or lifestyle is, but if you look at their eyes, it can tell a different story. Just really focus on their eyes. Sometimes you can just see there's no life in them, or there's pain behind their eyes, or fatigue. And the eyes are an extension of the brain, as I've said before. It's so very true. And you can, like I said, you can see it. Someone might look healthy just in their body and everything else, but the eyes are the biggest clue that I can see. So I'm paying close attention to my eyes, and I haven't been using the Juve light for must be a couple of weeks now, at least. And I definitely feel like that's been a huge miss for me, and I've noticed my eyes have looked more pained in a way, for having not pained and inflamed from having not had this exposure to that that red light. And also the changing of the seasons, I think, has something to do with that. I really often struggle when it gets to autumn and then winter. So I need to think very carefully about what I do to mitigate that fact, but also to embrace the change of the seasons. Because often I've had this negative kind of mindset about it where I've thought, oh, bah humbug, it's coming up to Christmas time and winter and I don't like all the cold. But I need to embrace it. I have been taking cold showers for a long time now, but I feel like I need to embrace the actual elements more. Not always get too cold, but cycle between hot and cold. And I do need to start using the Juve more again, because I don't have it here, but I'm working on a few things here. For example, I've got my air purification tower just down there, and that helps with my air quality. I'm thinking a lot about air quality at the moment. Trying my best not to go into central London when I don't have to, and when I do, obviously I do a lot of the time, so that's where I do a lot of work and research and my studies. I think about that, and then I take routes that are less polluted than the main roads. I actually have an app that tells you which routes are best, and I think about what times in the day it'll be least polluted, and then I work around that. I'll also try and avoid really busy trains because that's the only way I can get into London, but I try and go on trains that are not underground if I can. And I also, for many reasons, I do that. Not just mold and all these other environmental factors, but also the people in the trains have a very negative kind of energy about them. And I don't think that's very good for health. Also, they're coughing a lot at the moment. People are coughing all over the place. When you get that change of seasons, that's what happens. And you feel like you have to be kind of like a ninja, just getting out of the way of people when they start coughing and spluttering and breathing on you, and you don't really want that. No one wants that, but especially me. Just even if I see you coughing and you're a mile away, I just won't even give you eye contact. I might for a second, just thinking, I don't like you. You're just disgusting. Because usually they don't cover their mouth. Yeah. So yeah, thinking a lot about my environment. This is often more important than food. Sometimes someone can have I've realised that sometimes someone can have a high deuterium reading, even if they seem to be eating amazingly well and doing all these things and fasting. They could still have a high deuterium reading, and it could be something in their environment or even their mental state that's making their body's deuterium level high. Or that they have a lack of love in their life. Or that can be self-love. It doesn't have to be like a romantic love. Although I think about that quite a lot, just in terms of what love actually is. So I've been challenged many times in my life to think about this. Not love as in the other types of love. I think in Greek they have so many different words for it than we do. We just have love, and that means so many different types of love, but it's difficult to define when it's so ambiguous. But romantic love has always interested me, because you think, is it just a chemical trick? And partly I think that because I know you can fall out of love too. So if it was this magical, mysterious thing that you could fall into, why can you also fall out of it? And then there's, you could go into it so much. I've thought about it a lot because I find it just very interesting. And I've been in these situations where I've asked myself, are you in love, or is it something else? And then you could feel like that for periods of time. But then as time passes on, even though you think, I could never get over this, it's terrible, you fall out of love, and then you might see that person again, and you have no feelings for them. So you could ask just from that, okay, was that really love? How do you define love? What is love? That's my view on it anyway. I just find it really, really interesting. My view is it could be something in between. So it is this chemical kind of trick maybe to get us to have families and stay together. But at the same time, it is something that you can't really it could be something that you can't really define or identify. That's what I'd like to believe anyway. I like the romantic idea of love. Even though I'm not sure I'll experience that anytime soon, because I just like being alone sometimes, often. I like being alone often. And if you're in that kind of situation, it's often with a person who makes you feel like you have to have all these responsibilities, and it can become more like I don't want to say a chore, but like you're restricted in a way. You can't just spontaneously do what you want all the time. I know that's part of growing up, but sometimes you don't want to grow up. Sometimes you don't want responsibilities like that. You can have other responsibilities but not want that. Where's the harm in that? So yeah, I was reading about how oxytocin can deplete deuterium from the body, and that there's these toys that deplete deuterium, these cuddly toys, and they can stay warm for several hours. Often with these toys, the heat actually dissipates so quickly, and you can't really have them hot for that long, but apparently these stay warm for a very long period of time, and they're interesting. It's interesting how these toys can deplete deuterium, and one of the mechanisms appears to be that I don't know how they do this more than other toys, but they seem to allow you to produce more oxytocin. I don't know how they do that. You could just get a dog. Maybe a dog can deplete deuterium as well, because you have that unconditional love from the dog. I suppose that's another thing about romantic love. Often it is conditional. It's not always unconditional. But with a dog's love is unconditional. Unlike, say, maybe a cat's love is very often conditional. If you don't feed it, or even if you just give it love and everything else, it'll often go off to your neighbour or someone else not far from you, and just pretend you don't exist. And then it'll just come back to you if it wants just somewhere to lie around or some food. So I'm a dog person. I think dogs are a lot more loving and selfless. And there's that unique relationship between people and dogs, I think, that no other animal can match. Maybe there are other animals, but I think just, yeah, there's that relationship a fascinating relationship between dogs and humans. Man's best friend. So, yeah, maybe I'll experience romantic love at some point. Maybe. It's been so many years and it hasn't happened. I don't feel like I've ever been in love, but I've been in love with a few dogs. Very cute dogs. But not humans. Not a romantic love. I haven't been in a romantic love with any dogs, but anyway, it's kind of gone off on some weird illegal tangent that I don't want to go down. That hasn't happened, don't worry. Yeah, what am I doing? I'm looking at this at the moment. This is my view. I love this card. It's like a 3D interpretation of London. all the major landmarks that we have. This one I don't really like because of what it represents. I won't get too political about that though. But large swathes of London are not really British. And they're owned by people with too much money from other countries who do questionable things with that money and who get that money from questionable things. That's all I'm saying. I tried another experiment recently as well with L-theanine, because normally I can't have caffeine because of the side effects, and that includes caffeine from green tea, and if I have too much of it, I can have a small amount. Green tea and cacao, 100% cacao. So I thought I'd do an experiment supplementing with L-theanine to see if, well, the idea is that it can counteract the side effects that you experience with caffeine. In my case, the side effects is increased seizure activity. For others, it might be difficulty sleeping, or you can get that kind of withdrawal. You get headaches and twitching of your eyes and stuff. But I tried the experiment, which is suggested to have a 2-to-1 ratio of the caffeine that you consume. So a 2-to-1 ratio whereby you're having twice as much of the L-theanine as you do with the caffeine that you consume. And this is supposed to mitigate the side effects of the caffeine. In my case, I tried this for a few days and I didn't feel any benefit. So either I need to have more of this, or I just need to, or it just doesn't work for me. Some people, these things just don't work for. Another thing I've looked into, which I did a few years ago, and I gave it some real thought, is I use a program called Prometheus, which you can extract the raw data from 23andMe to personalize your diet based on your genes, your genetic makeup, your genome. So you have these single nucleotide polymorphisms, and they can help to dictate how you metabolize certain nutrients. And you could personalize a ketogenic diet, for example, to have the ratio of different fats that might be best for you, depending on what the program says, depending on the expression of these single nucleotide polymorphisms and what they mean. And then you could potentially benefit more from that. So there are loads of things you could look at with that. It's quite hard to interpret if you don't know what you're doing. You just have all this information. It's quite exhaustive. Yeah, I looked at that quite a lot. And I tried to adapt a few things from it, but not as many things as you probably could. Another thing I learned from that is that I'm not the best metabolizer of dichloroacetate, which is can be used as an anti-cancer agent. I also learned, interestingly, that I'm less susceptible to the effects of placebo because of how it suggests that my brain chemistry is made up from these specific, characteristic. I found that really interesting. Um, and I'm quite skeptical as well, so maybe, yeah, it's just interesting how it suggests that the placebo effect isn't as pronounced with me, it appears. So, yeah, I found that really interesting. Um, what else? There was this story about this dog in the news. This dog with a brain tumor, and they used 3D printing to create a new skull for the dog. I found that an interesting story. There's been more and more stories about brain tumours over the past few years, definitely. When I was first diagnosed, I'd barely seen anything about brain tumours, barely heard about them, didn't know anything about them, or very little at least. Now there's been this explosion over the past couple of years at least, and heard about them a lot. Maybe that's because we have such a huge instance of them. And I do believe it's high deuterium environments, and not just high deuterium food environments, but our environments in general, and also your mood and sun exposure and all these things. Climate change. Climate change has a huge impact on levels of deuterium. So all these things put together, it's no wonder that you see all these brain tumours. Just even if you take into account increases in population and increase of age, you have more and more people who are younger and younger getting these brain tumours. Makes you think a lot. I should probably get to sleep now. Have a lovely weekend. If you're watching this at the weekend. If you're not, have a lovely day.